Good afternoon, everyone. My name is John Draper, and I am Vice President of Research and Training here at the Stem Cell Network. A couple of housekeeping notes before we get started. Today, you'll have a number of speakers talk, and for each speaker, they will talk for 10 minutes, and at the end of each talk, we can have 1 to 2 questions through the Q&A chat box. So you can place those in the Q&A through that button at the bottom of your screen. After the talks, we'll have a 20 to 30-minute panel discussion, and we will welcome audience questions for the panel. And you can also put your questions into the Q&A chat box at any time for the panel discussion as well. I'd like to officially welcome you and thank you for joining us on the Academic to Industry Partnerships Roundtable webinar, hosted by Stem Cell Network and adMare BioInnovations. For those who are not familiar with Stem Cell Network, we are a national not-for-profit organization that supports 3 main objectives: stem cell and regenerative medicine research, training the next generation of highly qualified personnel, and supporting the knowledge mobilization and transfer of stem cell and regenerative medicine research. We are here today to discuss the importance of academic industry partnerships in advancing the field of stem cells and regenerative medicine. Partnerships between academic labs and industry are a key element in building innovation and accelerating research, and successful partnerships enable the sharing of resources, including money, skills, and idea, as well as the development of the next generation of talent. Today, you will hear from a fantastic panel of expert speakers, including Cate Murray, Amie Phinney, Bharti, Ranavaya, and Guy Savageau, all of whom have valuable insights into the benefits of academic partnerships and the best practices for developing collaborative industry partnerships that will enable your research towards the clinic and commercialization. With that, I will now pass it over to Christine Allen, who at adMare, who will provide a welcome on behalf of our valued partner.
Thank you, John. Hello, everyone. My name is Christine Allen. I'm the Vice President, Ecosystem Development at adMare BioInnovations, and I'm delighted to be here today with my colleague, Amie Phinney. For those of you who aren't familiar with adMare, we are Canada's national biotech venture. We do 3 things. We build companies, we build ecosystems, and we build talent. I'm also a professor at the University of Toronto, and I've been at U of T for more than 20 years. I took a leave of absence from the university to join adMare because I believe in their vision of Canadian life sciences leading the world. I see tremendous value in the work that adMare is doing to enable and accelerate the translation and commercialization of technologies that are developed in Canadian universities and hospital research institutes. And Amie will be able to speak to some of the great work that she's leading in that area. So I look forward to the presentations today and discussion that will follow. And thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Back to you, John.
Thank you, Christine. So I'm going to introduce our very first speaker, who is Stem Cell Network's own Cate Murray. Cate serves as the president and CEO for the Stem Cell Network, and since 2017, she has secured $69 million in federal funds to support stem cell and regenerative medicine research. Today, she's driving change and growth at Stem Cell Network. This work will ultimately lead to innovative therapies and technologies that will benefit the health of Canadians for years to come. Before joining Stem Cell Network, Cate has held various roles in politics and public service, translating into millions of dollars in earned national media and support from stakeholder organizations, politicians, and members of industry. Cate, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, John. That's great. And Ellie, maybe we can move to the first couple of slides. So my job today is to talk a little bit about where the Stem Cell Network connects in and supports academic industry partnerships. But first, I'll take it back a couple of steps and tell you a bit about the network. The network is now 21 years old, we have a vision to power life-saving therapies and technologies for regenerative medicine for everyone around the world. We're a not-for-profit, but more than being a not-for-profit, we're a community. We're a community of researchers and trainees who partner with industry, with charities, with hospitals and other entities who want to see stem cell and regenerative medicine research pushed forward for the benefit of all patients. As John noted, we support research, and that's from development right through to clinical trials. We train next generation talent to work not just within academia, but also within industry and other sectors. And we also enable the translation and exchange of knowledge for patients, for policy development, and for research. So we've got a pretty expansive mandate and a small, powerful team that works hard to bring the community together to meet that vision and those objectives. And go to the next slide there. So all of our work is fueled by partnerships. There's nothing the Stem Cell Network doesn't do that doesn't involve a partnership. And here, I just wanted to highlight for you the results of our last spring's funding competition. This was the first competition of two for the 2022 to 2025 period. From that first competition, we were able to inject 19.5 million into 32 regenerative medicine research projects and clinical trials across the country. And this investment was matched by our partners with over 22 million in their support. So that's tremendous, a tremendous injection into the stem cell field across Canada, and has really helps to bolster the activity that's going on. And we're seeing that in the demand and in the results that come out of the research that we've been supporting. And you'll note here that we've supported over we have research going on in 17 research institutions across Canada and 20 different disease areas. So we can move on from there. The rest is, you can read off screen. So for us, the advantages of industry academic partnerships comes down to four things, which I'll just I'll tell you a little bit about here. Obviously, validating translational potential. By bringing academic researchers and industry together, we're better able to fuel translational and commercial potential, and to make sure that the research that will eventually hit the marketplace has been validated so that it is ready for investment by external sources. We increase those resources. Partnering with industry, partnering is absolutely incredible part of our work. And I'll tell you about some of how we do that as we go through. And Ellie, you can just bring up the last two bullets there, Ellie. And it's the exchange of knowledge as well, and enhancing productivity. And I thought it was really interesting that according to some published data, academics who are in the same research area and have a product with a high commercial potential publish at a higher number and a higher rate if they have an industry partner compared to those without. I think this underscores the real importance of industry academic partnerships and how it powers outputs. So we can keep going from there. And so I've mentioned before, and you heard John talk about our three core programs. So how do we engage through those three core programs in academic industry partnerships? We do that through our research programs by funding clinical trials. We're de-risking clinical trials that are at stage 1 or an early stage 2 so that they can continue to move forward and attract more investment. We do it through a specialized program calling the Fueling Biotech Awards program. And this program brings together researchers with early stage companies, Canadian companies that are wanting to validate IP, who are wanting to make sure that it is really ready for investment. And this program is designed specifically for those academic industry partnerships. And to date, I think we funded about 12 of these, a number of different companies involved, and we're looking forward to funding more of them in this upcoming competition. The competition that we currently have ongoing right now has seen the largest uptake for this program since we've launched it, which is terrific. And then on the training side, we know that talent is absolutely critical for successful industry stickiness, so to speak, and for making sure that our industries are able to grow and have the talent they need to succeed. So we do this through partnerships with entities like MyTax and our industry internship programs. We do it through the workshops and webinars that we offer, many of which are career-based. Some are like today's webinar, in fact, where we're learning about best practices for research collaborations with industry. And we also support academic industry partnerships through knowledge mobilization activities, networking at our Till and McCullough meetings, which I'll speak about shortly, bringing our companies that have been catalyzed or supported by the Stem Cell Network to the next level and putting them in investor conferences so they can shine on that stage and attract investment. I just had an opportunity a few minutes ago to talk with one of our researchers who's launched a company called Axolotl. Axolotl we're bringing to the Obio Investor Conference later this week, and she was telling me about the high demand and requests for meetings with her company. This is terrific, and this is what we're happy to facilitate, is that companies that have come through the network have an opportunity to then realize their commercial potential. And we also do promotions through our website and special social media activities on our companies and on our scientific founders as well. So we can move on from there. Here's an example. On one hand, I'm promoting one of our companies and one of our researchers right here. And this is Shinichiro, and he's working with Aspect Biosystems, who many of you may know. Aspect's based out in Vancouver. They have a really fantastic 3D bioprinting technology, and they're working with Shinichiro with funding from the Stem Cell Network through our Fueling Biotech Partnership Program to look at the development of 3D bioprinted liver tissue that will eventually be able to be implanted into patients who are suffering from liver failure. Really cutting edge research and technology. And we're so happy that we've got one of our companies and one of our researchers being able to collaborate and work together with support from the Stem Cell Network. And we can keep going from there. But that is just one example. Today you'll hear from Guy as he talks about Excelthera. And Excelthera is a Canadian fan favorite for many of us. What incredible work Excelthera has done over the years under Guy's leadership and with his team. And the Stem Cell Network has been thrilled to be able to participate in that journey, helping originally to launch some of the funding that came from that led to Excelthera way back in 2008. And additionally, we support in other areas, such as with type 1 diabetes and the ViaCyte group. So I think that's enough there. So you can see how our programs continue to push forward. This is David Thompson. And David Thompson is one of our clinicians who's working on a clinical trial. And his clinical trial is on type 1 diabetes, and he's partnered with Tim Kiefer out of UBC. Their work is a collaboration with ViaCyte, and they're taking a pre-insulin cells, beta cells, inserting them into a device that looks somewhat like a credit card. And once that gets inserted into the body, it then is able to start producing insulin cells that will hopefully take people off insulin altogether. This clinical trial is getting underway with patients being not only enrolled, but receiving the therapy this month. And we can keep going from there. Our MyTax industry internship. So on the training front, we launched this program in January 2022. I think we're looking for new companies and new potential interns right now. But these are some of the people that we were able to match with Adlarta, with Blue Rock, with Aspect and Axolotl. This is a fantastic new program for us with high demand, and I think it's a great way to fuel our companies with high caliber talent. And so I hope this will be something that many of you will take notice of in the months to come and may get involved with. TMM, this is our annual scientific meeting. It's not just for trainees, it's not just for PIs, it's also for our companies who have an interest in participating in the regenerative medicine space. So what does it offer? It offers the Career Connect event to find people who may be good for working with you. It offers an opportunity for you to share your technologies, to talk and partner with some of our researchers. And it also has a great opportunity to find out what's going on across the country in the way of Canadian research. And now we'll let the slide evolve. These are some of the companies that have been enhanced or catalyzed by the stem cell network. There's a little over 20 or 24 of them at this point, but these are some that have been supported through stem cell network funding over the years. We're excited about all of them. They're really tremendous. And this is a sector that's really just getting going. And I know that in a couple of years' time, this slide will be twice as full. But I thought it was important to give everybody a sense of already how exciting this field is in Canada and what Canadians are producing in the way of new companies. And finally, I'd note that you need to stay in touch with us, because in the coming months, we'll be announcing news around a founders training for scientific founders who need to learn the skills around what it means and what it takes to launch a company so that you can have great success like Guy's had with XL and so many of these others have had. So stay in touch, and we'll have more to say on that. And I think that might be the end of my slides. Is that right, Ellie? Yep. There you go. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Cate. Thank you very much. I think we can squeeze in a very quick question. Anything coming up in the Q&A? Okay, so how are you connecting stem cell international researchers who do not have access to, for instance, the MITAC internship, but fully equipped to contribute to advanced regenerative medicine?
How are we connecting international
researchers who do not have access to the MITAC internship? So it's really about how does Stem Cell Network interact with international researchers?
So there's a number of ways that we do that, but the one that I'd highlight for you today is some of the exchange programs that we are in the midst of working on. One of those being with the UK. The Canada-UK exchange program allowed us to pair researchers and trainees together so that they could work, the trainees could go over and work within labs and bring back learnings and vice versa. So that's been an important project for us over the last year or so. We're now looking at rolling out that type of international exchange program with some other countries, including Japan, which is also really valuable. We also engage in ISSCR and making sure that our and ISCT and the Termis conference to make sure that our researchers have the opportunity to shine on the international stage, and that international investigators have an opportunity to learn about what is going on in Canada. We also always welcome international researchers to the Tillamookalla meetings. It's an excellent way to build collaborations and synergies. So there's a wide variety of things that we do, and I'd be more than happy to share some of the other things that we do offline.
Thank you very much, Cate. So now our next speaker, as the Senior Director of Program Development and Partnerships team at adMare BioInnovations, Amie Phinney uses her biomedical research and business administration background to create and guide scientific collaborations. Directly prior to joining adMare, Amie was at Northwestern University in Chicago, where she established an academic VC partnership aimed at translating academic discoveries into novel therapeutics. Amie has a PhD in biomedical research from the University of Basel in Switzerland and an MBA from the Lake Forest Graduate School of Management in Chicago. and has also held roles in research leadership, project management, and partnerships. Amie, welcome.
Thank you, Jonathan. I'm going to try to share my screen. Hopefully it will work again. Let's see what happens. Let's see. How did we do?
It's perfect.
Excellent. All right. So thank you very much for having me today. I'm very excited to be here and talk a little bit about one of my very favorite subjects, partnerships. As Jonathan mentioned, I've spent I spent the better part of my career working in academic industry partnerships. And interesting, as I look back, I actually started my career in the academic side, working in an industry partnership. So I think I've seen academic industry partnerships from all sides, and I'll share a little bit about what I've learned over the years, and then how I'm using this information at adMare to support the Canadian ecosystem through partnerships of all types. So let's see if I can get the slides to advance. So as Christine mentioned, at adMare, what we do is we build companies, we build ecosystem, and we build talent, and we aim to do so through partnerships in all levels of our mission. But before diving into that in particular, I want to just take a step back and think about partnerships and academic industry partnerships in general. So as I said, I did my academic work and I was sponsored by industry. And then I moved into industry and where I was working with academics. And I like to start thinking about this as an exercise in how the pharmaceutical development works in general, right? The pharmaceutical industry, as you all know, I'm sure this kind of diagram is very familiar to everybody on this call. It is about a process that starts in discovery, preclinical development, and then manufacturing and clinical. And in, I would say, earlier days, all of these activities were done under one roof, and pharmaceutical companies were really responsible for a lot of this work inside of the company walls. And partnerships were often employed to augment that internal practice. And this was certainly the case when I began my career, but I think today things look differently. And I think today we have a much more modular drug discovery and development approach. And each stage of that process can be both funded, executed, and monetized independently. And so what you have here is something that I know you're all very familiar with, and this is how I like to describe bio-entrepreneurship. And that is looking at it from this perspective, that VC companies or other funding entities, university funds like Stem Cell Network can fund each of these stages. And then there's the opportunity to develop and advance these assets and this technology along the pipeline, the development pipeline, either through partnering with additional funders or additional groups, or of course to license it to a pharmaceutical company that continues to do that work that was the foundation of the industry. So I think a question I'm asked very often when I've been working in academic industry partnerships is, what is the best way to go about commercializing if you're working in one of these individual modules and drug discovery? Is it best to do it through, always thinking through the partnership lens, to do it through partnering for a new company creation with investors, or do a licensing to a pharma company or another biotech company that could possibly advance the technology, or do you do a combination of both? And so I thought we would just take a few minutes to look at the types of partnerships that are available in the academic industry partnership realm in the life sciences. And this is a table that no means is exhaustive, but it really tries to capture the three main types of partnerships that we see when we're dealing with in the academic industry partnership space. The first, of course, is licensing, and try to break down a few of the key characteristics. And again, not exhaustive, could have many slides just on this topic alone, but I hope to give the highest level of overview. Right, a licensing is a partnership between a firm and a founder, and the definitions are there. The firm is any organization that partners with the innovator, usually to provide funds or other services. Can be a pharma company or a biotech, or even in some cases a VC, but where the deal structure is usually based on an upfront paid fee to the founder, to the innovator, the person who discovered the innovation that is going to be developed. And then the deal is usually structured around milestones and royalties that are going to be paid to the founder. The interesting part of this is the role of the founder, usually in a licensing agreement, is second in the partnership, where the firm usually takes quite a leadership role, both in the company, the asset, the R&D, and even the commercialization strategy. The middle column is reflective of what we call the co-founder or the new co-model, and there's several different ways of articulating this type of partnership. Again, for simplicity here, I'm focusing on a few of the key terms that we most regularly see. Right, the deal structure and a co-founder agreement, a new co-creation in order to commercialize a life science project or an asset. Deal structure is usually milestone-based, with disbursements of money for the R&D to be paid by the firm, and then with shared equity and royalty for the milestones that are coming out the back end. And if you go down the table, you see in this case, it's usually the firm and the founder work very closely together on all aspects of the company and the R&D and the commercialization strategy. In the last column, we have the VC investment, and these are partnerships as well. All of these things on all of these categories, I really do categorize as partnerships because they're always working together, just under different frameworks. So in the last column, the VC investment type of partnership, this is where usually there's an upfront cash disbursement paid by the firm to the founder, but it's done so in a way where there will be shared equity and royalties at the end. And again, the differences are coming down in the deal structure in general, although these are much more flexible than some of the other ones, right? Where the founder can take a leadership role, the founder will take a leadership on the R&D, and the firm will really use, and the firm and founder share the commercialization strategy. Again, generalizations, but I hope it gives you that overview of the types of partnerships which are possible. So thinking through Partnerships 101, I put a few key things here that in my experience are important to remember when you are you have an innovation and you want to figure out which partnership model is best for you. Key thing first and foremost is to proactively choose your partner. And do so by considering things like your primary business objectives. What role do you want to have in the commercialization partnership? Going back to that table, do you want to be the leader? Do you want to be the supporting party? What are your capabilities? Do you have the R&D capabilities to do it? And then lastly, but certainly not least, is thinking about it from a point of view of what does the innovation need? So you may have wishes to start a new company and to grow at that company, but the innovation may be much more suited into a licensing opportunity. So thinking of it from the perspective of the innovation, I think is really important. The other 2 points are sort of supporting the first one, and that is know your partner and your deal structure, whichever way you choose. Know that each of them is different. And although you need to focus on the big picture when you're doing partnerships, you do have to read the small print. So knowing what's in your deal structure. And third and final is every partnership framework, all the 3 that I described there and every combination of those has a framework. And all the frameworks should include strategic imperatives to align the parties, defined governance structures, including decision-making and conflict resolution procedures, and finally, both formal and informal working structures that will really guide how the 2 parties are going to partner and work together. So at adMare, we engage in multiple different types of partnerships, and we aim to advance innovations at every stage of development. There's the partnerships, the academic spinouts, at the earlier stage, and the part that I'm leading here at adMare, the co-founder model. We've got direct investments, and we also have the accelerator program that Christine is heading up, which partners with new companies to get them off to a really good start. I'll close up by just spending a few minutes talking about why partner. As I said, Amie does many different partnership models to try to get advance assets and projects at all different stages of development. But one thing that we are very passionate about is that partnering does help. And Cate, I loved your slide and your reference to the publications and groups that partner, academic groups that partner actually publish more. I love that, and I'm going to go back to that and steal that from you. This is a slide that I built from a white paper that was published in 2020 from a global startup studio. And what it is looking at is a group of companies and comparing those that took a more traditional startup role, that was where the founder was the leader for as long as possible and leading the funding raising and the R&D, versus those that were partnered early to co-create a company and drive it forward. And some of the statistics really struck me. Most importantly, the four that I've highlighted here on the screen. Groups that partner have an increased probability of success, a greater return and total value. And most importantly, for those of us who are working in life science and working against the patent clocks, the time to inflection was significantly faster for those groups that were partnered for those that decided to go alone. And if you're visual like me, seeing this kind of data and this kind of presentation really helps me very much to think through, if you're co-founding and you're going through a partnership model, you get significantly higher value in a shorter time than you do trying to go it alone. So my last slide in the deck here is just to talk a little bit about best practices. I think I'm out of time, so I think I'll just leave these for food for thought for all of you. Do know that when you're in a partnership, especially a life science partnership, it's a long relationship you're likely going to have to manage. You should understand the partnership life cycle. You should understand all those aspects of business combination, what makes a successful business, and always remember the importance of perspective. Not only does perspective cause conflict, but it also is often the driver for innovation, because seeing the same problem from two different points of view is innovation in itself. So I think I'll leave there and take some questions if there's time.
Thank you, Amie. We are pushed for time, but there's if you can answer this one quite quickly.
Yeah.
As a research scientist, where do we work in the pathway from formula development to medicine, and how important is our role nowadays?
I think the role is constantly in increasing importance, and especially post-COVID, where a lot of the attention on life science and that drug discovery process has come very much earlier in the process. So as academics, you're often in the earliest part of that discovery work that we described, and I think this is the foundational work for everything that has to come across. So I think it is my perspective, it's the most important part. And I think, partnering right from that early start is part of why we like to talk about partnering two groups like this and focus on academic industry partnerships, because it is so critical to the rest of the process.
Right. Thank you very much. Okay. So I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Bharti Ranavaya. Is a leading research commercialization professional with a well-established success record over 15 years of bringing life science technologies from research institutions into the commercial sector. She's worked for UK organizations, including the NHS and Oxford University. Her passion to ensure research and clinical discoveries deliver and impact patient care has led to her to establish numerous companies and strategic licensing relationships with industry in sectors such as medical imaging, remote patient care, and diagnostics. Her industry experience includes with Bayer and Agilent Technologies. Moving to Canada, Bharti, in her previous role of a licensing principal at Princess Margaret Cancer Centre, implemented the Innovation Acceleration Fund, a first in Canada commercialization gap fund internal to a healthcare setting with the aim of advancing key oncology discoveries to impact. In her current role leading new venture creation at UHN, she manages the cultivation and propagation of companies founded on UHN discoveries. Bharti holds a PhD in quantitative genetics from the University of Birmingham in the UK and a BSc in Biomedical Sciences. Bharti, thank you.
Thank you, John, for the kind introduction. And I'd like to thank both Stem Cell Network and adMare for the opportunity for UHN to come into this incredibly important panel and the discussion today. So I guess I'd like to start with, for those of you that are not familiar with UHN, discussing a little bit of an overview about ourselves. We are a research hospital and we are translational. Our mandate is very much around patient impact and delivering patient impact into the ecosystem, both within Canada and globally. And as you can imagine, in order to deliver that, what we're really speaking about is products that will benefit those patients. So in order to, manufacture and develop said products, what we're really needing to do is work quite heavily with a lot of partners, not only those within our ecosystem, but others that include industry partners such as pharma partners, alongside investors, etc., for when we're looking to formulate companies as well. Again, just a quick snapshot for those of you that may not be familiar with our institution. We are comprised, or a consortium, I should say, of a number of research-led hospitals. I shan't go into any of these in detail. I suspect most of these names resonate for the audience here today. What I would like to highlight is that at UHN, we internally have a huge ecosystem based on translation, and what that transpires into in reality is working very quickly and very early on with industry partners. And we do that in a number of ways. I know Amie, you spoke earlier about some of the outputs in terms of licensing relationships and or ventures, new companies that can be created. Within UHN, we do have a lot of first earlier touch points with industry partners, for example, and these can be manifested into, sponsored research agreements, etc., that have really led to, as you can see by this sheet here, just under 14 million last year being raised in terms of the funding that's coming into UHN through said industry partnerships. What I'd like to really talk about within this presentation and within this slide is the fact that there are a numerous number of very well established and pathways to deliver patient impact, and neither is wrong or right. Each one has its own merits. What I would like to focus on is that commercial pathway that one may wish to undertake when thinking about their research. Arguably, this is the pathway that really is the propagation or the part of the relationship that industry is most interested in wanting to partake in, i.e. that commercial translation. There's a number of reasonings for this. Mostly it's related to the way in which a partner such as an industry works and the type of exclusivities and requirements they need to act as an industry organization. For example, they will need intellectual property, maybe in the form of patents and or other intellectual property in place, and they may need some type of exclusivity and, arguably some sort of a right to firstly develop those said products. And the commercial pathway really lends itself to positioning your research in a way that may be arguably, as I said, the most amenable in attracting some partnership with industry. Amie, I know you had a very similar slide up within your presentation also. So, kind of echoing what Amie mentioned, there's a very detailed pathway that is associated to ultimately that patient impact, ultimately to being able to deliver that product out into the marketplace where an individual or a patient or a hospital ecosystem may benefit from that. truly, and arguably no one institute, be it academic or industry, has all the acumen and expertises that are required that are related to this entire pathway. And you'll notice that when you kind of, go out and do a little bit of research, you'll see that there are very bespoke programs that are offered through industry partners such as large pharmaceutical companies, which are really around being involved very early around the discovery research part, because they would sense that within the academic spell, there is a lot of research going on. It's blue sky and open. It's not mandated in any way. And, a lot of exciting new ideas are incubated within our ecosystems in that way, which may not be what an industry ecosystem is attuned to, and therefore they want to partner very early on these, maybe blue sky innovations that are coming through. The other thing that I would like to highlight within UHN is that we like to very much de-risk innovations internally as much as we can in partnership with industry or other ecosystem partners. And, I know it was mentioned earlier that we do have internal de-risking funds available. And what we're really trying to do here is have almost like a risk sharing process in place where what we want to do is really move our innovations into as close as possible the market within this diagram as possible. And by, hopefully being able to partner with whomever it may be, we can put in place some funding to enable that alongside said partners. Again, I know that other colleagues have spoken towards this somewhat within their own presentations. So I shan't dwell on it too much, but what I would like to perhaps add or say is that there are a lot of different reasonings why one may want to think about partnering with industry when it's associated to their research. I found through my own experiences working with clinicians and researchers, the reasonings can be quite broad, and they're very personal driven. There are some individuals that are maybe perhaps very early in their careers, and they would like to have within their resumes, mentions of having worked with industry, mentions of having perhaps been an inventor that led to the filing of a patent, etc. Other individuals are very much driven perhaps by wanting to see their, really believing in the end point that their research is going to impact that patient population on, and wanting to drive that forward, etc. So, this slide really kind of talks about some of the reasonings and the value of why, thinking about wanting to partner with industry may be important for yourselves. And what I would say at UHN is that we build a very large diversified relationship with a number of partners. So when, colleagues from research communities come to us with their innovations, what we're really looking to do is understand the nature of the innovation within the space of an industry partner. Is there a partner out there that works in a similar ecosystem to the research that is being undertaken? And is there synergy there to draw a partnership and a collaboration on? So this is actually my last slide, and the slide that I wanted to spend a little bit more of a time on, if you like. And it was really me thinking about, well, what are the, potential ingredients that lead to a successful relationship with industry? I think it starts very early within your research work and the way that you may be wanting to consider and position it. I think that one needs to be very, very clear on what is the end point of their research. For example, if you've found a very innovative, novel target that has some very important downstream effects, and it's very much a drug discovery type of innovation that your research is going to lead towards. It's very useful, and I know it's very difficult, but it's very useful to start thinking about, well, what is that going to look like in terms of unmet clinical need? Which indications would this really benefit, etc.? And taking a look and thinking about, well, you know, if I know that this is the sector and or the indication that my you know, potential drug would impact patients on, what is the landscape that is currently out there? What is the product development sector? What other drugs, for example, and therapeutics are available for this patient population? You know, certainly within UHN and within other similar institutions like our own, our office will certainly support in, you know, starting to think about your innovation and your research in this manner. And you may ask, well, why are we starting to, you know, try and position or think about our very early research in this manner? It is very useful to do this because it's the nature of the conversation that needs to be had when trying to think about finding a good industry partner to collaborate with. These are the types of questions that industry will very much ask for or ask within themselves. So it's useful to start positioning your own research in a similar manner to the way in which industry may be thinking about positioning the research internally to see whether they do want to or not want to form a collaboration with yourselves on wanting to take this forward. It's very, I think that when once that positioning has been done and you know, alongside support, you're going out to seek a good industry partner, it's taking a look at what their goals and their objectives and the development pipelines and aspirations are as a company, and whether they sit well with yourself as an individual. Because truly what's key in enabling success is establishing a very close working relationship with the industry partner in the future. As others have mentioned, it is a very long partnership, so it's very good to have you know, synergies in terms of the goals and aspirations and be able to form a relationship that works well based on that. I think it's also incredibly important to think about aligning your goals early on. The earlier, the better, and the more open and transparent the conversations are, I find, the more useful the collaborations that are drawn from those conversations tend to transit into. Part of those conversations really take into account thinking about what I've called it gaps and expertises, but truly what within your ecosystem or within your own expertises do you lack? Is it an expertise in, I'll use the drug therapeutic pathway as an example again, but is it perhaps the gap of formulating composition of matter, for example, on top of your target? You know, really, where do you think there are gaps lining up for yourselves where you need a partner or an external expertise to come in on? Do you think of industry as being scientific colleagues is something that I certainly would implore. You know, I've found that having worked with a number of academically driven institutions previously, there is a misconception of industry. You know, they have been referred to the ivory tower type of cynicisms previously. It is very much incorrect. You know, these are individuals similar to yourselves that have really got an aspiration from within academia to move translational work forward. So do you think about what, you know, expertises would be useful to have come into yourselves as well? And, you know, this is maybe where the last bullet point around understanding expectations and flexibility is something that not only resonates with your own research and what you may wish to have happen to that research, such as publication expectations, for example. But at that point, you know, the institution that your research is being conducted within may have expectations as well. You know, as I mentioned for UHN, it's really delivering patient impact. And is there flexibility in enabling all of these goals and aspirations to be met? truly what tends to happen next, once everybody has aligned very much from a scientific content perspective, is that you'll find that you'll start diving into contracts and agreements that really represent the nature of the collaboration that's happening. And I think it's really fundamental, at least for UHN, to firstly think about what is that collaboration truly going to look like? What is the research plan? Who is doing what, when, and how? And our culture and our ethos is really to build a contract and or an agreement around the basis of that research plan, that collaboration that has been put together. And truly what we also do is bring in legal counterpart very early as well in ensuring that the goals are aligned very quickly, so that these contracts can be drafted and put together in a very timely manner. So once the collaboration has begun with your industry partner, what enables ensuring that that project gets moving and is successful? I find that truly, the devil's in the details, so to speak. It's very, very important to ensure that you have a very detailed research and development plan. It may seem cumbersome in the beginning, but I think it's very worthwhile putting in that time and effort right from the get-go, because you and your partners are very much aligned in a very open, dynamic manner in terms of what are the objectives, what are the milestones, what are the timelines, etc. So it's also very important to dedicate, an individual, a project manager, into ensuring that this research plan is moving ahead in the manner that is required. It goes without saying, constant open dialogue and monitoring, which this project manager can enable, is very important. Blips always come along. It is the nature of science, and being able to highlight where an issue or a problem may lie very early and very quickly to enable a solution in an agile manner alongside your partner, if that is industry, is very important. Some of the things that can also help a little bit in enabling a successful project, dependent on the type of collaboration and project that's being run, may be elements such as having a steering committee, for example, and one of the individuals within that steering committee being an independent reviewer, i.e. an individual that's not associated to either of the parties that are in, forming that collaboration and developing the project itself. So these are sort of, some of my thoughts around the possible ingredients that need to be added in to enable for a successful partnership. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bharti. We're just going to pause on questions for this one, and because I think we can address those during the panel discussion, because we are a little bit behind time. And so I'll ask Guy just to start sharing his slides while I do his introduction. So our next speaker is Guy Savageau, who is the principal investigator at the Molecular Genetics of Stem Cells Research Unit at the Institute for Research in Immunology and Cancer, or IRIC, which he founded in 2003 at Université de Montréal. He also co-founded the Center for Cell Therapy of Montreal, the Quebec Leukemia Cell Bank, and lately a biotechnology company, Exalthera. Guy Savageau is also a practicing hematologist in the HSC program at the Maisonneuve Rosemont Hospital. His work emphasizes studying the molecular basis for self-renewal in hematopoietic normal cells and leukemia. And his team identified several key genes that regulate HSC self-renewal. More recently, Guy's team, in collaboration with Anne Marnier's group at IRIC, discovered the small molecule UM171 that promotes the expansion of human cord blood derived HSCs ex vivo. This breakthrough is being successfully translated to the clinic, and UM171 is currently in several phase 2 clinical trials. He is also the leader of the Lucigene project, which aims at improving AML subgroup characterization and developing new prognostic tests and therapeutic strategies for AML. The Lucigene team identified drugs selectively targeting AML subtypes and developed and validated a novel AML prognostic test that predicts resistance to current therapies. Guy, please begin your talk.
Thank you. No wonder I'm always so tired.
We can see your slide view. We can't see the full slide presentation.
Yeah, there's something wrong with the full slide. So is this okay like this?
Yeah, I think we can manage. Oh, yeah.
Okay, I'll make it even larger. Okay, so hi everyone. Thank you for attending. So today I'll basically try to show you the example of Excelterra as a biotech created through the collaboration of many laboratories in our country with the help of the stem cell network and other partners, as you'll see. And I guess the goal of this presentation for me would be to show you where it was important for us to have a commercial partner into this whole endeavor. So, so of course, I won't be focusing on the results, so I apologize if I go a bit fast on this. So again, a collaboration between my laboratory, which aims at understanding stem cell, self-renewal and rejuvenation, that of Anne-Marie here at IRIC, who's a medicinal chemist and loves developing bioactive molecule with therapeutic efficacy, and Peter Zanstra, who was in Toronto and now at UBC, bioengineering, and Peter loves to develop robust technologies for stem cell amplification. So this all started with the issues that we had with cord blood transplant, where the number of stem cells is always limited. And that leads to what we call TRM, or transplant-related mortality. So the goal was really to find ways, molecules, genes that would allow us to overcome this issue with cord blood transplant. So in the early days, this was a fairly important substantial team grant that the Stem Cell Network did support between many labs in the country. And we conducted a phenotypical screen and found a very nice molecule called UM729 here at IRIC. And this was the most potent hit that we could find in the screen. The chemist in Anne-Marigny's lab under our Center of Excellence IRICOR funding and support really optimized this molecule from a sub micromolar to a 2-digit nanomolar one. At that time, we of course didn't know how it worked, but what we knew is that we could optimize the molecule in a fed batch system that Peter Zanstra's lab developed and further optimized. Again, stem cell network support for this. And this led to the first publication of this molecule in Science by Iman Fares in my lab as a pyrimidoindole derivative that supports human HSC self-renewal. So the next thing was obviously, or I would say the concomitant thing was obviously to do patent filing, IP protection. Again, Iricard and Anne-Marigny were instrumental in doing this. Again, we're always in academia. And Stem Cell Network very critically at that time helped us to support the large-scale synthesis of the UM171 molecule, whose strategy was developed here at the Medicinal Chemistry Unit. Again, through Stem Cell Network support, we did a lot of tox studies. This one is one example in primate where we provided safety for this molecule. So then came clinical trials. So the first trial was initiated in 2015. We just wanted to make sure that there were no side effects for expanded cells in humans and that we could lower this transplant-related mortality, at least indirectly through shortened neutropenia, that we could better match the cord with the patient, and that we could improve immune reconstitution. And I won't go through the data, but basically we achieved this. This was under the leadership of Dr. Sandra Cohen at Maisonneuve-Rosemont Hospital, Jean Roy, Sylvie Lachance, Jean-Sébastien Delille, and other clinicians. The primary endpoints are shown here. It was published in Lancet Hematology. And in fact, we were quite surprised by the results of that study. For example, transplant-related mortality, which is normally in the range of 20 to 25% with cords, was at a mere 4.5% with long-term follow-up in this initial trial. So we wonder if this was luck or this was solid when compared to registry data, paired registry data that we just got the result. These are the results of the UM171, and a lot of these patients were end-of-the-road patients, basically at the in refractory diseases, second allogenic transplant. They had failed the first allo, and this is the comparator here. This will be published shortly. So the question then was, what's happening? How does it work? Why are we getting these results? And so mostly through CIHR funding, we recently identified a new Q3 ligase complex under the E3 ligase KBTBD4 that leads the degradation of an epigenetic complex called CoREST1. And this degrader, so UM171 is basically a degrader of this complex. And I'll get back on this later if we have time, especially if we have questions, because it's a very interesting novel complex. But what was interesting also is that it does not just amplify the cells, but it creates new cell types in these grafts. So these grafts are very different. And most importantly, T and NK cell component of the stem cell is dramatically enhanced by 2 logs. And so the patients see more T cell diversity and so on and so forth. Not the goal for today's presentation. So in summary, we did some basic research, and UM729 was synthesized here at IRIC in another program before 2010. HTS was done in 2011, and we identified this 729, which was the hit. It was optimized to UM171 in 2012. We gathered preclinical data, tox, and had pre-CTA meeting with Health Canada in the end of 2012. Then in 2013, we scaled up, so got some GMP molecule and formulation. We prepared the CTA. We met with Health Canada. The cell therapy laboratory here in Montreal was completed by 2013, so ready to produce this. We revised the manufacturing and stopped the trial after 1 patient, made some changes, and resubmitted this in 2015 and really started this trial that I showed you. So then we realized that we couldn't do this anymore from academic grants, and we needed support. And I remember meeting people at that time, and they told me something, that this was only the beginning. And they said, the tough part is coming. And I was like, these guys, they don't know what they're saying. And today I can tell you that indeed commercialization, in my view now, is a lot more difficult than the science. So what does the company do for this? So first and foremost, financing, obviously, relations with investors. We all started this with angels initially. The branding, the strategy to maximize benefits to expenses on that's going to lead to a first approval. And that's very critical because you can spread yourself too thin on so many initiatives. Approval, regulatory, designations, these are words that I did not even know prior to this. Manufacturing, getting a BLA from the FDA, the formulation, this is enormous. It's work that, again, I didn't realize before this. Now, revenues, how do you generate revenues? Of course, we all think about sales, but sales include adoption, so you need to work on the clinicians. It includes reimbursement that are specific to each jurisdiction. So we've learned that licensing can be extremely lucrative, and we've done this for areas where we do not intend to work on, and developing subsidiary companies, which I could expand later if need be. So the company has a huge R&D angle for future developments. The company is heavily involved in IP protection and patent maintenance. And human resources, this is not a lab, so performance evaluation, annual evaluation, so on and so forth. So let me just give you a couple of examples of slides that basically illustrate some of this. So Excelterra defines itself as a world leader in blood stem cell expansion and rejuvenation. This part comes from what I mentioned earlier about generating new grafts. In fact, we realize that even old grafts from old patients now, when they are treated with this molecule, they reacquire T cell differentiation as if they were young cells. Production of single patient vials for commercialization. The different platform that the company is taking, all of the issues involved in the first clinical program, including the now cell therapy program, or Dorukubicel. The summary of the designations that the company has pursued to obtain, including orphan drug designation, RMAT from FDA, so on and so forth. Now, illustrating how the Dorukubicel will go on market opportunity. How do you define that market? It's a lot of work and a lot of consultants, and again, something that a lab cannot do. Then finding the right programs that will maximize the cost to benefit ratio for approval. In this case, it was the donor-less program, and we are about to submit in September this year to the EMA all the documentation for approval, with early sales in France starting as part of a specific program in January 2024. So in basically 11 months. And market access strategy, how do you do this? Of course, this is complicated and requires a lot of expertise. So as part of the research and development, then now you start to go after additional indications. And how do you approach this? And these are things that the company has helped, so that now we're moving from cord blood to bone marrow and mobilized blood for all sorts of indications all over the world, actually. Solid organ tolerization, we realize that we can play a huge role there, and our key partner there is our investigators at Stanford. Engineered HSC, so again, the stem cell network has helped in an industry academic program to help us develop what we call the EHSCs. And we're currently developing further molecules based on this series that are even more potent and more active. So I will stop there by ending with my favorite guy, David Millett, who's been co-CEO and Chief Operating Officer. David has been instrumental and has been with us for 5 years. And I couldn't agree more with one comment that was made earlier. I can't remember by whom, saying, it's really important to find the right partner. In this case, our right partner was really this guy who remains instrumental for our company. So I stop there, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Guy, and thank you to all of our speakers. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Christine, who's going to moderate some questions and a panel discussion.
Wonderful. Thank you, John. And thank you so much to all of our speakers. I have to say, if I wasn't convinced of the value, the tremendous value really of academic industry partnerships, I certainly am now. And Guy, I think you really brought all of these presentations home in the sense that it's just so wonderful to see just the brilliant work that you started in academia moving forward into the clinic, and the contributions, really, I think the important contributions, obviously, that the stem cell network that obviously have played in this. And then also Amie and Cate and Bharti, great to see your passion and real commitment to enabling these new discoveries and technologies that are emerging from academic and research institutes, and just ensuring that they are actually able to reach the clinic or to have an impact on human health. So I'd like to say then, we'll see if we have any questions here in the chat. I know we had a very specific one that was for Bharti. And so maybe we'll get to that one first. And this was around a question from Ada Bagaloo. As part of the de-risking process, would UHN consider partnering with organizations that produce knowledge translation products? So scoping reviews, implementation reports, for the purpose of reducing internal risk?
Short answer would be yes. We're highly committed to de-risking the innovations to deliver the impact. So any partnership that enables for that, we're all ears towards. So yes, get in touch with me. Yep.
Wonderful. So hopefully Ada will reach out to you. That's great. Maybe I'd like to, I have to say, I really appreciated some of the data and published evidence around the benefits associated with these academic industry partnerships. And Cate, the study that you had mentioned that found that industry academic partnerships can result in increases in publications. And I actually think there's a good chance it may be also in an increase in the quality of those publications. I certainly have found myself that when I've collaborated with other academics or industry partners, the quality of that publication has also improved. And I don't know if that's something that others have seen or would be willing to speak to.
Maybe I can add to that, Christine. I think, it's one of the most frequent questions that I'm asked, whether in my role today and in previous roles that I've had coming from industry, is there's a genuine concern with when partnerships are formed that the academic is not going to be able to publish. And I couldn't agree with you more that it's not just about the number of publications and the quality of publications, but every commercialization strategy has a publication strategy associated with it. And I think that publications and partnerships often take a different timeline than an academic would on their own. But overarchingly, I think the result is that there's more publications because it has to be part of your public commercialization, right? Your doctors have to know about your medicine, have to know about your mechanism of action if they're going to adopt the product. So it's a really key part of commercialization. And I think academics are always pleasantly surprised when they see the full scope of the publication strategy that is associated with commercialization.
Awesome. And I know most universities in any sponsored research agreement include this, a statement around publications and the need to, for example, provide 30 to 90 days to the sponsor, right, to approve that publication. But in general, there's always this opportunity to publish, which is, of course, so important if we have trainees involved in this work. Maybe I could also go in another direction and ask a little bit around, you both, Bharti and Amie, referred to the importance of setting expectations for academic industry partnerships. And I think there are a couple really great slides. I actually took a picture of one of them. It's so helpful to me. And just thinking a little bit about the importance of doing this upfront, because everything is wonderful upfront, right? When we, from that outset, when we first start the partnership, everything is absolutely fantastic. And it's usually as work progresses and you might run into some issues that communications can become a little more challenging. So how do you facilitate or enable that? I don't know if this is a question for you, Cate or Bharti, Amie, whoever would like to take it. But how do you ensure that there is this kind of very open dialogue from the outset? And if there's anything that folks are uncomfortable with, that you kind of flag that or help them work through that with the partner?
Maybe I can jump in first of all from a UHN perspective. The conversation starts super early. We find, there's touch points at conferences and so on and so forth. So the dialogue starts very quickly in a very open manner. And as you mentioned, it's very much attuned to the science and, meeting or wanting to collaborate from a very scientific perspective. And I believe that the majority of the, shall I say, transparency is around that in a very open dialogue. I think that where it falls over a little bit, perhaps, is when it starts to come to the contracts. And as I insinuated at UHN, we don't want to jump into the contracts quickly. What we want to do is be involved in those dialogues very quickly and very early, because there are nuances within the nature of the relationship that is being developed from a very, scientific perspective. We've mentioned publications, and there are other outputs as well. Industry will be very interested in the intellectual property that, for instance, has been generated within this said collaboration, and whom has rights over that intellectual property, and at what point and for what, etc., and to what extent. There's a lot that goes on just on that one conversation, and it's something that, as an institution at UHN, we have certain requests over as well, and certain viewpoints over. And so we find coming into that dialogue very quickly and very early alongside the right counterparts within industry, as it's not so much the scientific counterparts, but counterparts maybe through their legal offices or business offices, that we want to connect with very quickly, to come to some sort of consensus towards. I have to admit, there tend to be very templated mechanisms now to enable for both partners to get what they want, how they want it, when they want it. But I would stress that we find that these dialogues are very important, particularly with partners where they haven't worked with institutions where the research stemming from academia, so to speak. That conversation can be new to them. It's a very new type of partnership, for instance, and sort of having those dialogues very quickly and very early are useful before diving into those contracts.
Wonderful. Thank you, Bharti. Anything to add, Cate or Amie? Guy? Pretty much.
I'll add two things. I agree with everything that Bharti brought forward. I think the most important thing for me with regards to managing the expectations is making sure that every single party that is involved in the agreement has a clear understanding of what they're getting into. And there's lots of mechanisms to ensure that. I know here at adMare and other organizations I've worked with, particularly when it comes to an academic contract partnership, we want to make sure that the institution, who usually is the signing party, they read all the legalese, they understand the legalese, but invariably there is a section on a schedule, an amendment, part of the contract, which is directed towards the professor who's involved. And it should be in lay language, and it should be signed by the professor saying, yep, they understand the key points and they understand the rules and the expectations. And the thing that I always encourage as Alliance Manager is, if you don't understand it, make sure you ask the questions. Transparency and expectations are on both sides. You have a responsibility on all sides of the party to make sure that you really are nodding your head and understanding what your expectations are.
Thanks, Amie. That's really important. Cate, anything to add on that? I think you're unmuted. Perfect. Go ahead, please.
Well, I think these guys have knocked it out of the park with their responses. So I don't have too much more to offer. But one of the things that we've done a couple of years ago is we've created a resource kit for people who are scientific founders who are thinking about launching a company. It's available on the website, and it asks some very specific questions and helps to provide a bit of a guide. And we've done that with some support from TTOs. So I think it might be worth having a look at if you're thinking about what are the questions, how do I build the partnerships, what are some of the things to think about. I think we're redesigning our website right now, but I think there's a resource section on the website where it can be easily found in both official languages. So I just note that for those who are looking for something on paper.
Fantastic. Thank you. And there was a mention of funding for some of these partnerships. And I think that's something that academics often wonder about, how are we going to fund this research? And in fact, I would say that, partnering with industry opens doors to additional funding. And maybe you could comment a little bit on that. We could start maybe with Cate.
Yeah, that's a really great observation. And it's true. I think that, where do you find the funding? Well, there's a great desire to be able to fund partnership activity, partnerships that are going to spur and move commercialization forward. And that's what Iroquois does and Stem Cell Network does. And also, there's a number of different entities across the country that will provide that kind of support. In the case of the Stem Cell Network, whether it's a clinical trial or whether it's a fueling biotech or an accelerator type award, this research, we don't look to take a stake in any of the IP that comes from it. So we're de-risking, and this is, this should be able to support that partnership. It should help to move you forward, to help to validate that research, to help to make sure you can get to the next stage of activity. And so that's really, in part what our mandate is about when we talk about growing the field of stem cell and regenerative medicine research. It's not just about bringing people in, it's about moving that research forward. And so these are the types of programs that we offer. And it's very important at this point in time for us to make sure that we're not handcuffing any entity, whether it's a company, a university, or a researcher, by also saying, yeah, we want in on the IP. We're there to facilitate and get the research done.
Great, thank you. And Amie, I know adMare has a bit of a different model, but I've been just myself, only being in adMare for about 7 months, been really impressed with the financial commitment that they make to projects. And maybe you could speak a little bit to that.
Sure, absolutely. I think one of the themes I'm hearing as we talk through this is about the research funding. And I think when I looked, when I had my table of the different types of partnerships, I think one thing that should have hopefully came across was that, for the most part, industry partners that are aim to partner with academics, aim to fund the research. And, as Christine mentioned at adMare, what we aim to do is to fund the entire amount of research that we know is necessary to advance the technology. I know industry partnerships have different ratios of that. And again, going back to know your contract, know what the commitments are. But at adMare, what we do is we fund the entire research plan. And the other thing that I holds to attention here is about the structure. Again, going back to contracts, thinking through about funding mechanisms, it's important to know your milestones, because almost in none of those, in no contract that I've ever seen, whatever type of relationship it is, there's usually milestone-based and disbursement schedules that are associated with achieving those milestones. So often you see at adMare, we will say, it's going to be a $2 million research project that is going to get us from point A to point B. But we do know that there's pieces that we're going to have to hit along that line. So we'll disperse the money in that way, both to our internal teams and to the partner teams that are doing the research.
Fantastic. Thank you. And maybe just Guy, I was so impressed with your presentation and just seeing in particular the way you highlighted kind of all the complementary expertise that's needed to really drive a technology forward into the clinic successfully. I'm just interested to understand kind of your role in all of this beyond kind of that academic discovery, the extent to which you're involved and or maybe your trainees are involved.
Well, in this case, I think I've been involved more than what I see on the average.
Okay.
And sometimes I ask myself why. And in many ways, it's been fun and I've learned a lot. But I think in the case of less typical technologies like this one, there ain't that many cell therapy technologies that have gone through approval, and certainly not in the field of stem cell expansion. There's been more failures than success. Mm-hmm. I think it was important for the company that I stay close to the technology. Mm-hmm. Also, how to best position the technology, and this is extremely difficult because, as I said, you can do so many things But if you spread yourself too thin, you rapidly realize that you're not gonna, you're not gonna go under regulatory appropriately.
Right.
And it's a steep learning curve to deal with regulatory agencies in this field. So I think one aspect that the company has done, and where maybe I was more on the learning side, is to determine what we're going to pursue and what we're going to out license.
Okay.
And for example, in this case, IPS technologies is not something that this company is doing. So we've been approached, and in this case, we gave a very nice license to a small pharma called Astellas, and it was really a very useful license for us because it brought a lot of money to the company, and basically clearly defined the field or an indication, if you want, where we would not be going into. And I think learning where you're not going is as important, and maybe sometimes even more important than learning where you are going. And again, in this business, it's not a small molecule for human use. It's more a reagent in this case. And but I guess it's probably true also with small molecules. You need to have a very strategic plan on where you're moving next. And sometimes it only happens through some trial and errors. I know that VC, they like things to be very clear. And Amie said something quite interesting a few minutes ago. She said, we give $2 million and you move from point A to point B. But frequently when you move from point A to point B, as you know, Amie, you realize that it's not point B that you wanted finally, because you realize that point C is even more interesting. And then where do you stop? So it's all academic.
And I think that's a great point.
Move to point C and point D and point E, and business, they want to move to point B. And I think there's a middle ground, which is quite interesting.
I think that's a great point. And I think it also reiterates the importance of understanding those stage-gated milestones that most of these development plans are built upon. It's not just built to ensure that there's a stop point if the research doesn't hit that particular goal. It's also built like that to enable those pivot points.
Yeah. No, it's anyways, it's a fun experience, but yeah, I've been involved more than the average, and I would encourage people to stay involved, because it's a lot of fun. Sometimes I see people trying to drive investigators rapidly out of their company, and I think it's sad, because I think the company loses a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yes, especially as the inventor of the technology, so much great knowledge, right? And experience that's of value, I think, to further development of that same technology. So I think we're going to have to wrap things up, unfortunately. I just want to thank our brilliant panel of speakers. Wonderful, so many great key learnings today and pieces of advice. I really enjoyed this, and I thank everyone for attending. And I can see my co-host John is back on, so I'll also let him say a few words. But on behalf of adMare BioInnovations, I thank you all very, very much.
I echo those sentiments. Fantastic learnings from all of the speakers today. Just for those who have tuned in, the webinar was recorded, and you'll be able to access this later on through SCN's YouTube channel. We look forward to seeing you on more of the webinars and training events that both adMare and Stem Cell Network host. And thank you. Have a good afternoon or morning, wherever you are.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.